John and I really enjoyed this conversation with an amazing politician from Birmingham, Lisa Trickett. Lisa is a former chair of the Active Wellbeing Society that's run by Karen Creavin and is often referenced by Martyn Allison as the very best example of how the physical activity sector can work effectively with communities to improve population health and address inequalities. So John and I were fascinated to hear from Lisa how the Active Wellbeing Society operated under her leadership, including the incredibly successful scheme that involved giving bikes away to people who could least afford them and the lessons that were learned as a result. I think the most important and impressive aspect of this conversation, though, is that Lisa is heavily involved in the system as a politician and knows the system needs to change and is actively going about doing so. Lisa is also involved with the National Labour Party, working very closely on the environmental side of things, including active travel, and is a real force to be reckoned with. Lisa knows firsthand the value of physical activity helping to address health inequalities and is a fantastic ally for our sector to have now and in the future, possibly with the changing government. With her help and others like her, our sector can play a major role in preventative health programmes at a local and national level. Please enjoy this one.
Thank you very much for your time, Lisa. Lovely to meet you. I'm Andy. This is John.
Hi, Andy. Hi, John.
And we're going to start off nice and simple, Lisa, to get you in the flow. So, can you tell us a little bit about your career today, in whichever shape and form you want to take that, but also where physical activity might play a part? Somebody tells me you're a bit of a wild swimmer, by the way.
I am.
Okay,
I am.
so over to you.
I'm known to get my kids off in the cold. So, probably for the last 20, 30 years, I've worked in the sphere of public policy, in private, public, academia. So I've covered everything. A lot of the work I do is around place-based working, regeneration of cities and communities. And in the last few years, I've established, co-found very small but boutique and sweet cooperative Place in Common, where I probably hit my 50s and thought, I've spent all of my life working in the system. Now is the time to actually give some time to challenging the system.
Right.
So I'm also a politician for my sins. I'm a councillor in Birmingham, which is a bit tough at the moment. Whereas with Place in Common, I'm very much working on action on climate, working with communities of place, practice, interest, to try and generate that system change. And then on the side, I'm co-chair of Labour's Environment Campaign nationally. So that's a little bit busy also at the moment.
Yeah, I should think it is. So can you tell us a little bit more about the Places in Common and the challenge in the system? Tell us a bit more about that. What instigated that, and what successes have you had so far?
Okay, so I think many years back, I worked with Bob Kerslake, who was then a senior civil servant, on a Leadership of Place programme. And it was the time my brief was to go out and get communities to change the way they behave. And when I sort of went out into the various communities and met people and looked at the situation, it wasn't the communities whose behaviour needed to change. It was the system holders, the system enablers, the leaders themselves. And so we developed a Leadership of Place programme, which was very much about getting leaders to engage differently with communities, to actually understand you probably have to provide a return for a community. There's no point if somebody can't actually feed their kids, saying that something's going to happen in 10 years, it doesn't make any difference. And so I'd done all that sort of research and work before being a politician. I've spent 12 years as a councillor, experiencing the worst effects of austerity. I chaired the Active Wellbeing Society, chaired it through lockdown, where we set up the emergency food relief programme. I, understood and experienced deprivation in a way that I did not believe still existed in my city. Absolute poverty still existing. And it was really on the back of all of that, it was like, okay, I'm going to free myself from working for a given person and I do a lot of work with the University of Birmingham. We're working particularly in East Birmingham, where TORS is based, and the whole idea is that we've got an urban living lab, and we're working with a whole range of communities, businesses, residents, faith groups, TORS, to actually try and establish a much more coherent system, and trying to draw in tools that TORS has learned over the months, drawing in tools that I've learned prior to my political career, and again trying to actually ensure that all of those key elements of infrastructure are built into communities. And in particular, what we learned very much in lockdown, and we now have always taken through in TORS. With TORS, there's always been the point, and I do it in my work, you have to be at the place that residents are at.
Yeah.
Don't expect residents to come to you. And one of the things that I talk about a lot is, if you have got no choice or control over your life, how can you actually say you expect somebody to get active or take up a sport? If you've got boobs and you can't afford a sports bra, why would you want to go to a gym? So what you actually have to start to do is to actually find ways that give people choice and agency. And once they have some choice over their lives, or some choice or agency over something, then you can start to talk about active, which I think is really where probably out of 12 years of being a politician, being chair of TORS, the thing I'm most proud of is the Birmingham bikes. Brum bikes, by far, one of the most cost-effective, impactful interventions I've done.
Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Okay, so we started, and it was, I think, about 10, 12 years ago, looking at cycling in Birmingham. We are very much a car city. Car is king. When I was growing up, if your dad worked at the car factory, you went to Benidorm, the rest of us went to Bourse and, had a caravan. So the car has always had status in Birmingham. So really talking about cycling or walking has always been a difficult conversation to have. We have beautiful parks, we have 600 parks, we have great rivers, we have fantastic canals. People will walk, but as a general term, this city was built around the car. Its growth was around the car. So,
and this industry was...
Absolutely. People's status, people's jobs, people's livelihoods. The housing areas, Chelmsford Wood, Castle Vale, Longbridge, all built around car factories. So we hadn't really, as a city, unlike, say, Bristol or London, really had a history of talking about cycling. And there was starting to be a much more of a push about cycling. And when I decided to stand for election, I'd already been cycling to the university and various things. And so I kind of agreed with Friends of the Earth and a couple of others, I'd make a point of being a cycling councillor.
Right.
Big mistake, because as soon as I'm elected, I'm chairing a cycle forum, and I'm facing a bunch of men in Lycra, all demanding segregated lanes, and Birmingham having no idea what he was doing. And we amazingly put together this sort of programme and plan with the cycling lobby, with people like Karen, and Karen's team then was actually in the council. TORS was as yet to be established, and we set up and set out Birmingham Cycle Revolution, and it was how we were going to harness our canals, use our canals for cycling, which got a lot of the cycling lobby very cross because they wanted the segregated lanes, but it was, if the canals are already there, why can't we use those? So we put cycle lanes throughout Birmingham Cycle network. I did learn the lesson several years in that nobody had explained to me that the canal network's not lit. So when I was happily going through inner city Birmingham cycling on my bike and suddenly realised I was in quite an interesting part of the city with no lights, it was great. And that to me was an example of just, how we can sit in our council houses as politicians and think up these things, but actually you have to go out there, you have to understand it, you have to smell, experience it. You know, if you want to create policy, if you want to create change, use your 5 senses, don't look at a piece of paper.
Absolutely.
And one of the big things that we were talking about was actually just breaking down the barrier to cycling. And actually that barrier is people can't afford bikes.
Yeah.
You know, they're expensive. And second-hand bikes people can get. But we've got whole communities where actually cycling is just not on the radar. So I was persuaded by Karen that it would be a good idea for us to actually look at giving bikes away, and that would encourage uptake in different communities. And again, that whole thing about peer pressure and stuff. And that actually really appealed to me as a politician, because when I was growing up, Norman Tebbit was telling my brother,
Get on your bike.
get on your bike. So I was able to say, as a Labour politician, Tories told me to get on my bike. I gave a bike to young people. So it was a great political line, which is always if you want to sell something, you've got to give a politician a good political line. And we managed to convince the cycling lobby, who were originally very scathing. We managed to convince the local authority lawyers, who were even more scathing, that this would be a good idea. And for me, what was really notable, you got a bike, we targeted deprived neighbourhoods. The conditions were you'd have to learn to ride the bike, and you'd also have to have a lesson in maintenance. We worked with local cycle businesses, so we didn't rack them off that they were losing business. They were part of the sort of the repairs system, and I still do in my ward. We do cycle runs now, where the local business, the local cycle shop still runs them. You know, there's been a sustainability of that kind of cycle mass, we call them, relationship. But we basically gave 3,000 bikes away over a period of time. Cool. It's now gone to 7,000.
Wow.
You still see the Birmingham bike everywhere. What was critical was that we also gave somebody agency, that they actually applied for the bike and we gave it them free. And to me, that was really important, because we were almost started to establish a contract with that individual. We had trust with them. We saw they had responsibility. We asked them to look after the bike, but that was it. And we asked them to use it. And in the first tranche, because I was trusting but not that trusting, we put GPS trackers in. I think these are still a really good idea, and not so much now on a trust basis, but what happened was the GPS tracking showed me that people cycled in their communities in totally different routes to actually what the experts that the council had taken on to tell them where the cycle lane should be.
Yeah.
And that made us very much rethink where sort of cycle routes should be. And indeed now, some of the work I'm doing in East Birmingham is looking at how we permeate and make cycling accessible to those different communities. And that very original citizen-led research actually helped us do that. But, you know, and what we've got to this day is people who are in their first tranche of cycles got jobs, went on to have careers, to work in the city centre. We've got women who'd never left their community, who cycled on International Women's Day and the big Birmingham bikes, and danced in the bullring, you know, and reclaim that space. And we've got people running cycle clubs now throughout the city who started on those big Birmingham bikes. And you see the orange bike, and you know, it's just great.
It's fantastic.
And people talk about it, and it's a really, really positive, easy thing to do. And you know, it is about giving people choice, people agency, and it's also a transfer of wealth. You know, it does give that very immediate leg up. And as somebody who, again, I spend a lot of time at the moment nationally. We're really challenged by things like, I was in Cardiff yesterday, Tata Steel and the risks to the steel industry, and how we could actually secure a fair transition. And what I keep on saying is, until you've given somebody something positive that shows by going green, actually they're not going to lose everything. We're not going to change this narrative. The framing is being done by others. And actually, to me, simple things like giving a bike away is a real positive step in changing that framing and giving people the idea that going green actually does give you something different. And what you now see is families cycling together. It really has rolled and changed the profile of cycling in this city. And I'm sure Tours will be able to give you all the data and all the stats that you want.
Well, it's a great it's a great story, and I'm interested in how you, going back to the things that you spoke about. We don't necessarily need to get ultra political, but there is a serious economic challenge, isn't there? And it's been high profile. We know that we continue to have, despite the Marmot report of 2010, deepening health inequality. Against that economic backdrop, how do you continue to sustain those types of good stories and the sort of change that is necessary to get people healthier against this backdrop, this really severe economic backdrop?
So if you actually look, one of the things that I suppose influenced me very much in terms of becoming a politician, having been in a sort of policy and actually been an academic role, was where I first met Karen was on the Bishop of Birmingham social inclusion process, and that was back in 2009, I think, and 9-10. And I'd been out of Birmingham working for a good decade, working in different parts of the country, and the last thing I'd done in Birmingham was to commission a study of East Birmingham, looking at the inequalities in East Birmingham, and it was one of the most polarised area, life difference of 12 years between East Birmingham and the rest. And I came back a decade on, and there'd been no shift. And throughout that time, I'd been delivering regeneration programs in other parts of the country. It was like, there's no shift. We haven't shifted the dial at all. And then, alongside this, we'd had the market crash, and you can go to Canary Wharf and you can see the most deprived, awful housing conditions you will see anywhere. The same, Cardiff, went to Cardiff yesterday, go across to the Cardiff Millennium Centre. Fantastic building. You walk down a road though that has some of the most awful housing conditions. And what all of that said is the system and the way that we're creating and holding the system hasn't worked. And what we're seeing is the accumulation of that system not working is now costing us more and more. We've got more children being excluded. We've got an increasing number of people who aren't able to get training or work in the city. And what we've got to start to do is actually understand that the economics of just doing things in the way we've always done it is not working. And we have to turn things on its head and actually look at the pathways. And I think, one of the things I've got various catchphrases that can wind Karen up at times, is that the only certainty is uncertainty. So when people come out with these great plans of where you want a place to be in 25 years, we didn't think COVID was going to happen. Nobody planned COVID in. And it changed and accelerated overnight. Failures in the high street, movements, patterns of working to home working. Now, that accelerated things in such a way. You can see across every city now office blocks lying empty. So when you say to me in an economic crisis, how do you do this? You put your resources in a different way and you look at your pathway, and it doesn't have to be bricks and mortar. It doesn't have to be a project. Think about a pathway. Look at a community. Where's it at now? Where do you want it to be in 5-10 years' time? You want it to have You want social justice, because inequality is bad. It's bad for the economy, it's bad for the individual, it's bad for actually the resilience of our cities. If we continue to have polarised cities, we're not going to have safe cities. When you ask people what they're after somewhere decent to live, somewhere safe to live. Actually, if you get people moving about a city, you know, one of the things about you know, some of the areas that Tours works in, or some of the projects I've been involved in, is you get footfall and people start using green space. So we've worked with the University of Birmingham, got ERDF funding to bring the River Cole to, we took out a weir that had created a block in the River Cole. And for a start, the river flows, so you can hear the river. And so instead of hearing the traffic on the Coventry Road, you can hear a river. And we've put in an outdoor trim trail, a gym and an assembly point. We're now working in partnership with the local school, that's an all-through school, so we can engage with the mums in the nursery, but then the young people in who are 15, 16.
Right.
And what you start to do is you create use of that space. And people were saying to me, we put in wood gym kits, and we put in mosaic tiles and various things that it'll be burned. You need to put something flame resistant. It's not being burned. No. And it's the same as people told me that the bikes would be nicked. The bikes weren't nicked. One bike went on eBay. And that was because somebody couldn't actually afford to feed their family. And when we followed them back, was so mortified. If you put trust in people and you give them some responsibility and respect their rights, people respond. And that is the problem.
And you do, Lisa, you're right, you do have to have the courage of your conviction, because otherwise, if you bow down to those things, you know, the bikes will get nicked and what. I've been working with a project in a very deprived area of Stockport where we've developed a concept called confidence walks. We're trying to make the area safe for people to go out. Of course, people with long-term health conditions, they might be able to walk 5 minutes, but then they need a bench to sit down, have a rest. And people say, well, you can't put a bench there. They'll get vandalised. They'll get trashed. But you can't bow down to.
No, you can't. You can't.
Because you know the wrong part of society is winning. You know, we have to have be brave about some of the things that we do, I think.
And I think, you know, I've got this is no disrespect to any, because again, not wanting to make political points, but austerity has stripped capacity and capability out of many local authorities. So that there isn't the strategic drive coming from local authorities. So people play safe and want to stay with what they've always done, even though it's shown it's not making a difference. And what you've also tend to get in the voluntary sector, you have quite a lot of long-established voluntary agencies who've all got their own power bases, and I reference the power of incumbency. And what we miss out is we miss out bringing those hugely talented young people through, or taking the legacy of some of the older generation, the stories and the connection of older people. We miss out. So one of the things we talked about in East Birmingham was it was a highly polarised area. It's parts of East Birmingham you can still go to where there is a neighbourhood that's predominantly white, another neighbourhood that could be predominantly Muslim, Kashmiri. And what we were trying to do was to, you know, find how various things could connect. And my daughter had decided she was going to do her dissertation at uni on the impact of Kashmiri migration into Birmingham and what had it done about our stories. And she'd got these various stories. And one guy was talking about how he'd come over and he'd been working at BSA, the arms factory. And Alice had remembered that her granddad had worked at the arms factory, and her granddad's granddad had been at the arms factory on the night that the bombs had hit and all the women had died. What then started from that was connecting. And Tours now does a lot of storytelling, connecting the stories. And what you actually find is so many people of this area, whether of Asian origin, white origin, Irish origin, have got a connection to that BSA factory. And there is now a story that connects those people. And one of the things we want to do as part of the walking trail is tell the story of BSA, because if you're my friends, you've come to this city, a lot of people gave up really, really well-paid jobs in their area to come to Britain because it was better pay and it was going to give their kids a future. If you can share that legacy, you have an identity. And what we're building in East Birmingham is a shared identity. And when you have a shared identity, you have pride in the place. When you have pride in the place, you want to go out. Because again, what I think we have to remember is that in the middle of all of the work and the investment in sport England's done in this area, which has been brilliant, we had COVID.
Yeah.
And people, Couch to 5K is brilliant. But, that's what we have to remember is people just generally went back into their houses. And if you want to get people active, you've got to reach them at their doorstep. Yeah. Because that is where they're at.
Yeah. Okay, so picking up on some of the Active Wellbeing Society, and you mentioned Karen a couple of times, and you used to chair the Active Wellbeing Society. Are you still engaged now?
I work with Tours as partner as part of the River Cole Community Commons. Yeah. And I'm friends with Karen, and we go wild swimming together. So
right. Okay. Where do you go wild swimming? Just out of interest.
Anywhere and anywhere.
Okay.
If we can find a spot of water, we will dive into it.
All year round.
All year round.
Oh, good on it. Good effort.
Yeah.
Good effort.
Yeah. It's we've had there's been some interesting experiences, and the president of the campaign, Labour Environments campaign, is Fergal Sharkey. Yes. And he does a huge amount of stuff on water pollution. And I'll sort of say, I'm going for a swim in Saxon Mill, and that's the River Avon. And it's like, what's the water quality like? What's it like? And it has destroyed a bit my fear of, that openness. So I like lakes.
Yes.
I like lakes now quite a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, Fergal Shark is a bit of a hero of mine, but that's another for two reasons.
Teenage Kicks, fantastic.
Teenage Kicks, undertones, and also is I live.
You're a Radio 6 dad, aren't you? I can tell.
Yeah, a bit of a punk actually. So I live in Cumbria, so we've got the likes of Windermere, a beautiful lake that's been absolutely devastated by pollution, and it drives me mad personally.
Absolutely, and it's outrageous. And again, this is what now you're getting me on about that. One of the things that really winds me up is people say we need to build, we built this huge swimming pool in Ladywood, which is very lovely, but a lot of the people can't actually afford to go to it. And although there's subsidised tickets to it, those are at strange parts of the day. We have a reservoir. We have an absolutely beautiful large reservoir that, with a little bit of investment, would be of great swimming quality.
Right.
Why aren't we doing it? It would have a beach. If I go to Poland, I can jump in a lake and I can sit by a beach and I can walk. In Berlin, in between meetings, you can go to a lake and sit. We don't encourage people to use the assets we have. And we have all of these. You look over the West Midlands, we're landlocked, but we have a huge amount of reservoirs that we could, with a little bit of imagination, make accessible. And you could make it where every child in this region could learn to swim.
Lisa, again, Labour are going to, if they get in, which I'm sure they will, renationalise the railways. And again, I've had lots of issues around. I'm a wild swimmer as well, by the way, but I wear lots of neoprene and stuff. I'm a bit of a wimp. But the private time, I know, it's very true actually. It's all us blokes in neoprene and all ladies get in with their cozies and maybe a booty, and that's it. It's absolutely true. But yes, the privatised water companies actually tell you can't swim in these lakes and all the rest of it. Where in Scotland you can, and all the rest of it. So it's work to be done. Absolutely.
And that's where we set up places in common. Because this green space, this water, it belongs to us all.
Absolutely.
It cannot be commandeered by shareholders, and it certainly cannot be commandeered by shareholders when they're prepared to take £20 billion out of it but can't invest to make it safe.
Yeah.
And one of the things that, I fundamentally believe on is this return of the commons and the polluter pays model. Because again, people talk about the River Cole, and it was like, why would you want to walk along the Cole? It's filthy, and it's only filthy because some of the businesses round about are chucking stuff in it.
Absolutely.
So actually, maybe what we need to talk about is environmental improvement districts. And if you have a business in this area, you actually pay a levy to making this environmentally safe for the people round about. And one of the things we've got is we're developing a stewardship model where we're going to put young people in as the board of the stewardship, because it's their future.
Yeah.
So it's, we're merely custodians for them. And what we're going to do is train them into how to serve enforcement notices, because the idea being, actually, it's their land that is being polluted.
Love it. Absolutely love it. So tell us a bit more about your national role then, if you don't mind. Yeah.
So basically, I co-chair one of Labour's socialist societies. We're linked into the policy-making process of the Labour Party. And the one that I co-chair is CERA, Labour's Environment Campaign. And it's been going 50 years. So it's moved from the point where nobody talked about climate to sort of, the great peak of probably 3 years ago, where it was wow and everyone wanted to talk about it, and everyone wanted decisive action, to now where it's becoming a lot more of a wedge issue, and the words net zero seem to spark a whole load of actions, not necessarily helped by the far right and our own government. But what we are very much intent on as Labour's environment campaign is to be the honest broker of the change that needs to happen. We're a membership organisation. We have people and communities across the United Kingdom, and what we need to do is to ensure we haven't got a second go with policy this time around, because we're burning.
Yeah.
So actually, we need to ensure that we stay in touch with networks and that we learn from the real lived experience, and that's very much where we're seeing some of our work. Because when people are coming into government, or people think they are, every lobbyist, every company's throwing money at briefing Labour. What we're wanting to do is to actually tell some real stories. And again, this is where we invited Fergal, who's fantastic in the work he's done in raising the profile of water pollution. But Fergal became our president because what we saw was that actually it's very hard to talk about net zero, and people who work in the profession don't get net zero. But am I allowed to swear?
Yeah.
Okay. So people get shit in water, shit in the sea, people get. The fact that their rivers are polluted because the chickens, agricultural wash-off is going on. They get, the River Wye. The River Wye, that had a massive active sport, that has been curtailed by the levels of pollution in the last 2 years. People don't swim in the River Wye anymore. Karen and I used to camp of a summer, and we'd float down the River Wye. We can't do that now.
Yeah.
And
It's disgraceful.
And it's been allowed to happen.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we're very keen on is better regulation, because people cannot extract value from our natural assets and actually not put something back in.
Yeah.
And that just has to become very much, that is something we're campaigning for. And the other big message is we have to stay within 1.5 degrees.
Yeah.
It is our responsibility.
Yeah.
I've got daughters who are now, I don't have teenagers anymore. My little one just turned 20, but,
Same here.
It's quite liberating in a way, isn't it? But, if they want children, have they got a future? And, we've already curtailed a lot of opportunities and hope of that generation.
Yeah.
So we have a responsibility. So all of us who are sitting here in our sort of mid-50s, in our leadership positions, 60s, 70s.
It's very kind, John.
Thank you.
Can we,
I wish I was.
can we actually take a bit of responsibility
Yeah.
and actually reflect on what we haven't always done right?
Yeah.
And start to make the change, because unless we start now, we take away, the child who starts school this September will not have a future if we don't act now.
Yeah.
Lisa, much of what you've spoken about and some of the examples you've provided have sort of illustrated the importance of leadership and often quite charismatic and courageous leadership. In the context of where we are around physical activity, active well-being, what's your view on our leadership capacity and capability across the sector? What do we need to do more of?
Less men in tracksuits, less talk about elite sports. We have the Commonwealth Games, everyone talks about legacy. What legacy?
Yeah.
It was beautiful. It was beautiful for the image of the city, but actually what are we left with? And what we have to do is to understand, people are tribal, so we love our football. We love going to football games. The success Lionesses have made a big difference. That is something that we can collectively join around. And that's what we've got to think about, is people are tribal, they believe in community. So actually community-based activity, and what our leaders need to do is to actually recognise that physical activity, sport, is another part of what happens in people's lives. One of my other phrases that can get Karen twitching is, it's people who shape space to make place. So if you want to change places and you want to regenerate, start with the people.
Yeah.
And if you want to start with the people, close off a street, hold some street games, stick a net up,
Yeah.
kick a ball around. It is the best part. It is the best way of engaging in communities. What do we currently do as local authorities? Or if you want to open up a new sports facility, we hold a public meeting in a community centre. Why?
Yeah.
If you want people to get active,
Yeah.
go to where they're at. They're at home.
Yeah.
Close off the street. Go to them on the doorstep
Yeah.
and have the conversations there.
At the risk of you talking about your friend, but when we talk about leadership, Karen is often put forward nationally as like the best example there is of the type of leader we want. And Sport England are investing millions of pounds into leadership, and I guess one of the outcomes of that investment would be they want to create more Karen Creavins, to be honest, people who get it and understand it.
Absolutely.
What makes Karen so special from your point of view?
I think, and again, so there is no doubt Karen is an absolutely charismatic leader. Not always the easiest person to be the chair of, but brilliant. And I think one of the things is the ability to connect. Too many of our leaders stay in their silos and they think about swimming, or they think about the running track, or they think about the elite sport, or they think about the golf course, the cricket game. And actually what Karen can do is connect the people, the space, the place, the activity, and that's what we need. And one of the examples I always gave when I used to talk about leadership places, leadership's a relay race. It's about passing the baton on.
Absolutely, it is.
And too many people try and hold on
Yeah.
to the baton. And if you think, when I was doing work on leadership place, we just won for the first time the Tour de France. And it was actually, though, one person gets to ride that shirt, but look at the main photos. All the photos actually had a cyclist with 6 people around them. And the point being, that leader is only a leader for so long because it's the team that got them there. And what we need to absolutely do is build that collaborative capacity and encourage people to work outside the box, to take risks. We do need to take risks. And what we also have to accept is you do make mistakes, things go wrong. And that's in part where some of the investment that Sport England has put in has been very, very brave.
Yeah.
And Tours has certainly had the freedom, and the confidence they've had in Karen has given us the ability to take risks that others wouldn't have. It allowed us to, chameleon, like change into a food relief operation during lockdown.
Right.
But what that gave us is the most extensive community network
Yeah.
that we've got trusted community partners now that you would take years and years and years to actually foster through normal stakeholder business improvement processes. Business improvement processes will not change life experiences.
Yeah.
Actually taking people with you, bringing them into the game, actually passing the baton to them and letting them test the baton out occasionally is what will do that.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I'm sure Karen would say, and get a chairperson like yourself to support her and allow her to be brave and give her that support. And that's, again, joking aside, that's something that the governance structures need to allow that, don't they? To give people
and
room.
They're really bad at that, because that you are there to ensure the sort of financial interests of the organisation. And what I suppose I very much saw, and again, it was like, not being chair was great because I can now actually do the things I want to do, whereas as chair I was trying to actually manage the chaos. And that is not to say things were chaotic, but you had to actually just cover things through. And what we've got to all be is a little bit more respectful of what each other does, because too much professional jealousies get in the way.
Absolutely.
And poor some of the behaviours in the sectors is really, really frightening. Can we just get a life? Because there's people out there who are dying 10 years early. We haven't got the right to exercise our egos because we're privileged. So let's exercise our privilege in the right way and actually learn to work together better.
Do you think, you mentioned a couple of times, COVID was a positive thing in the respect of people working together and collaborating? I think that's what you were saying. Do you think that we've maximise that legacy of COVID, or is it drifting back?
Do you know? So I wrote. I was commissioned to do a publication about COVID and what that meant to how we could change the way, and that was how the River Cole project came out. But I wondered if it would prompt us to be a lot in where we're sitting. More people, the level of death and ill health in Birmingham during COVID, a whole generation of elders has gone in some communities. You could look at your Facebook or your Instagram, and each night there was people who I vaguely knew who had been to school with their dads dying, and then I found that the people I'd been to school with, they were dying. And you'd have thought the reality of COVID and the poorest population, the poorest of the population, the Pakistani Muslim population is sitting most at risk. You would have thought we'd have paused and thought, maybe we need to approach things a bit differently. But we haven't. And we keep on going. And we do just need to pause and learn from those experiences and start again. And I think, again, with a new government coming through, that is what we've got to get our act together.
Right.
And we've got to be a lot clearer about what the pathways could be. And what are our baby steps to making that change.
Lisa?
Do you not sense that there's one of the things that typified that period was that communities did come together, and they couldn't go anywhere else, and they did shoulder arms, and they did help one another out. And politically, I think that there was an appreciation of the importance of localism and embedding a neighbourhood approach. Do you think any of that has sustained?
So
I experienced some of it, I must admit, but it isn't true everywhere, obviously.
So I think, yes, some has sustained, and for example the Food Justice Network has continued in Birmingham, and it has been continues to play an enormously important role in providing food relief to poor families. I think politicians have always known that you need to understand and provide stuff in localities.
At a micro-local level.
What we're never good at is understanding how we share power across every spatial scale and sphere of governance. You know, it's kind of what I'm worried about at the moment. People talk a lot about green revolution and community energy. What we need is community energy. When you talk to some companies, what that means is them being able to build massive wind farms around villages, and they might fund the community centre. Now, when I talk about community energy, I believe that every member of that community has an equal vote, and they determine in where the revenue goes. And if they're going to stick some stuff up on mountains in Cumbria, then actually, how is that going to actually improve the environment and the quality of life for the people of Cumbria? And we've got to look at new models, and I think we're less ready to do that. But whether securonomics and whether some of the talk about local plans allows us to do that will be there. I think what COVID also showed us, and it wasn't just the levels of poverty. I, as a politician, had, argued against cuts, I've gone on the odd demo, my casework, week in, week out, fighting for people's rights. What I hadn't actually realised was actually how many services had just disappeared. And what actually COVID showed was how faith groups, small, local, informal community groups were actually part of our welfare state. And that
interesting.
That was what shocked me, because one of the things that I'd sort of questioned at times was, as a city, should we have policy that reflects faiths? If we're multi-faith, maybe actually what we should do is take a much more secular approach. But actually, if we don't work with faith groups, they are the backbone of the community.
Absolutely.
And, so to me, the importance of, and again, this is where I think if with local government, and, I'm not sure there's any magic money tree around the corner, but what local government must not do is think Labour's going to come in or money's going to come their way, so everything's going to be fine, and they ignore all of that beautiful infrastructure that has grown up through the years of neglect. Because if they do, they won't reach the communities we absolutely need to reach. And it comes back to understanding the totality of assets in an area.
No.
Okay. Fantastic. Lisa, we're on to the quickfire questions now. Just a few, and actually it's very relevant to you, because one of them is, what one thing would you wish an incoming new government to do in relation to what we've been talking about? And I'm sure there's plenty of things, but what's your top of the list?
All my life, absolute commitment to 1.5, staying within 1.5 degrees, the Paris commitment, because the only way we can do that is if we change the way we invest and the way we involve our invest in and involve our communities.
The knock-on effect.
That drive for 1.5 will require the whole deck of cards will have to come down. So I want 1.5 because it means we will have to change.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Paradox question from me. What excites you most in terms of the opportunities for the future, and what might make you fearful?
Okay. I do think, and again, I suppose it comes when I've talked a lot about COVID, but people did reconnect with green space. There is definitely people who realise they got green space on their doorstep that they hadn't known before. And when you looked about our cities, green space, it connects different communities. And I actually think what we've got some areas of terrible, Jaywick in Essex, absolutely awful, Lowestoft, some of the deprivation, Hastings, areas that are really suffering, those coastal communities, and coastal communities where the children don't play in the sea, because again, we haven't connected them to the assets. But we've been around this block quite a lot. I've been working in regeneration. I was there with the previous Labour government. Let's learn the lessons of what we did wrong in the past, because, I made plenty of mistakes. Let's pick up on those and make sure there's enough of us still kicking around. Let's make sure we don't make them again. And we turn the trick. My concern that we don't own the challenge and make the change. Because if we
confront it. If we don't confront it.
And accept that, we haven't always got it right. And the assumption of consensus. What's wrong with a bit of conflict? Embrace it. Make it creative.
Excellent. Thanks, Lisa. And the very last one, at the moment, the sport and physical activity sector as a whole sits within DCMS, as you'll know. Do you think it's the right place to sit, or should we be in the Department of Health and probably with OHID in some shape or form?
I think it could be in the Department of Health. I think physical activity and connecting people to the whole place that they live, it cuts across. And in many ways, it's, people talk about planning frameworks, your statutory planning frameworks. You talk about putting in roads and stuff. Actually, your active pathways are part of your community infrastructure. So I don't really care where it sits. Because it is, but the point being, it's not just sport, it's physical activity. It's about people being themselves, owning themselves, and it starts with the person and with the community. So wherever it sits, it has to be about physical activity, well-being, and actually creating better places.
It sort of shouldn't matter, but it has done, hasn't it? And it shouldn't matter if we can adopt a more cross-cutting well-being agenda. So well-being sits in every department or whatever.
Marmot was so convincing. All the evidence was there, and the sheer fact that when you look at all the cuts, Birmingham's having problems at the moment, you see where public health monies are cut. Tours is experiencing massive cuts. So one of my concerns would be, if you're in health and you're competing with cures for cancer, waiting lists in A&E, will you be protected? And so I think it's just that kind of thinking through where it does.
It's great advice.
Sit.
Lisa, that's been an absolute fantastic hour. It's been brilliant. Thank you so much. One final question: who else do you think would you recommend that we talk to? Obviously Karen, but we're going to talk to Karen. But who else could you think that we might want to talk to learn a bit more about what we've been talking about?
There's a woman called Jane Murray on Druids Heath, outlying estate in Birmingham, and some of what she's done is really good. The other thing I think is anyone who bears the scars of low traffic neighbourhoods. Because we can all learn on how things could be done slightly differently. Equally, we understand the worst of the wedge issues and making things a wedge issue. So
fantastic.
Brilliant.
Thanks again. Thanks very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Cheers, bye.